Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. And I must thank Tim, because as a president, he has been expanding in terms of hospitality, like I can believe. So this is a very good start for a president of a Theosophical Society to be so hospitable to guests. Thank you for coming this morning. You are the important part of the talk, and it's about quantum activism. I know the word quantum is a little scary for some of you, but it is really simpler than the word indicates. The word started as a notion for a discrete quantity because it was recognized that energy is not continuous but consists of discrete bundles. And then it appeared that that discreteness actually is expressed in a form of much more radical discontinuity. Ordinary experience suggests that we have more or less continuity in our actions in agreement with the physics that Mr. Newton built, but quantum physics almost from the beginning became revolutionary in the sense that these quantum leaps, these continuous jumps, when an electron jumps from one orbit to another in the atom, it does not go through the intervening space. Quantum leap, quantum jump, discontinuous. Discontinuity entered physics. And fundamentally, then everybody knew that the old worldview that Newtonian physics gave us just is not sustainable. So in a matter of years, in the year 1925-26 to be precise, Heisenberg and Schrödinger, two great physicists, discovered quantum physics. And it has been the most successful theory of physics that was ever built. Its success is incredible. 1 part in 10 to the power 8, 1 part in 100 million. That degree of verification is unknown ever in terms of science. No science has ever enjoyed this kind of success. So if you don't like some of these ideas that I'm presenting here, don't blame quantum physics. It's not your dream of replacing quantum physics with something else is not going to materialize. So quantum physics today, of course, is not very popular in the science itself. Everybody uses it for doing mathematical calculations. Of course, they have to. But it's not popular. The message of quantum physics, apart from discontinuity, gives us one more phenomenon, which is called non-locality. This idea, most scientists cannot handle. Why? Because science from the get-go has developed the notion that the world is built of matter. This has long history. I don't want to go into it. Some of you already know materialism in one form or another, just as spirituality in one form or another have existed for millennia. But with Newton, this idea that matter is primary building block of nature became very powerful in terms of explaining the world around us. So the prejudice grew that the worldview of the spiritual traditions, specifically the worldview of Christianity, which dominated the Western world, that worldview, which was based on what is called a dualism, in which both our internal experiences and the external world are given credence, are given at least an equal partnership, although all religious people in their heart knew that the mental, the transcendent, or whatever way they introduced the inside part is more important. just as the materialist always knew that the external, what we experience in a public fashion, is more important. So these are the two worldviews that have played a role in our history. In the 16th century, up to the 16th century, the worldview of spiritual traditions, religious traditions dominated us. With the development of modern science, that changed, and the materialist side of the debate started gaining much more prominence. And then came Darwinism. Big step took place. Basically, as far as academic traditions are concerned in America and the world, academia were convinced that the world is made of matter. What is internal, what spiritual traditions call spirituality, what they identify as some sort of a force or power called God, are epiphenomena of matter. Somehow the brain is responsible for it. So this is the chasm we live today. Okay, why quantum activism? Quantum activism is the idea that quantum physics is not supporting these convictions that scientists have today, mainly physicists, biologists. This is not quite right, because quantum physics, as I said, talks about non-locality. Why is that anathema to materialist scientists? Because matter cannot interact without some sort of local signals. Non-locality, this idea of signal-less communication, is anathema to materialist scientists, to Newtonian physics, to Newtonian biology, to Darwinism. So, if the quantum worldview comes to be accepted, then scientific materialism, this idea that everything consists of matter and material interactions, is suspect. This is the problem. So the materialists, scientific materialists, are very entrenched. They want to save their territory and expand on it. And this is why activism is needed to dislodge their entrenchment. It's as simple as that. Why do I say that quantum activism can save civilization? And the question, does civilization need to be saved? Now here we need to say something, because what is civilization? What is the basis of civilization? Civilization, as you know, is progressive development of our embodiment of values. Now, mind you, there are problems here from both the materialist side and the spiritual side. Activism is needed for changing both. I submit, and I hope you'll agree with me, that not only the materialist side is a dogma. A dogma is a principle that excludes phenomena of experience. Clearly, if the spiritual side of us is excluded, the internal mind is excluded, and matter is declared to be supreme, that exclusive philosophy is nothing but a dogma. But please notice that dualism too, that matter and mind both are equal partners in reality, but there are two different realities, matter reality and mind reality. Is that sustainable? Is that not also a dogma? It is. Now, of course, as Theosophists, you know very well how to solve the philosophical issues with dualism. It's called non-dualism. And especially since Theosophy is so much influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism, it is not an unknown thing for a Theosophists use ideas such as all is one. I was hearing repeatedly people talking about oneness yesterday, which is quite wonderful. But I warn you that behind the way you think of oneness are still vestiges of dualism. I think it will all be better off if you sort of allowed the thought that, okay, I don't quite understand these non-dual ideas. I heard of them, I sort of tried to believe them, I tried to convince myself that yes, it is non-dual, it is all one, but I don't really understand it, how it can be that way. So again, activism, because quantum physics allows us to understand this without any ambiguity. And any person who is interested can understand it now. What is oneness? In simple terms, quantum physics supports oneness because it allows that concept of non-locality. Now let's introduce it a little bit more explicitly. I said non-locality is signal-less communication. What is the problem with dualism? Mind, matter, separate entities. God, world, separate entities, separate realities. What's the problem with it? The scientist points out the problem very clearly. How do the two realities interact? According to science, Newtonian science, materialist science, they can interact only if there is a signal carrying energy is exchanged. But energy of the material world alone is always a constant. Energy never goes from the material world into a world that you define variously as the God world, world of consciousness, world of mind. Such energy transfer is just not found. It violates experimental evidence. Dualism is not scientifically tenable. Could that be a valid philosophy? Of course it could. In philosophy, everything is allowed. But it's not scientifically tenable. This is very important to recognize. So if you accept the dualist dogma, then you exclude science. This is why Rush Limbaugh and others sound so anti-scientific. Because once you accept dualism, anything really does go. Then global warming cannot be real, then the sun could rise in the west. Really, everything is permitted. Because you have allowed that fundamental discrepancy with science, then you don't have to obey the usual science. It's only a matter of convincing people that your view also has a valid point. So this being understood, how does quantum physics then solves the problem of dualism? This is where non-duality comes in. This is where non-locality comes in. Non-locality and non-duality is identical concept. Why? Non-locality says signal is not needed, provided you allow that there is a medium of interconnection which is the permissiveness of non-locality. Why is non-locality permitted? Because there is this medium. And this same medium just happens to be the one with which we know. This is also something quantum physics says very clearly. How does non-locality occur in quantum physics? Quantum physics says objects are possibilities. They are not concrete objects. Objects are possibilities. How do possibilities become actual events in our experience? Quantum physics is very specific. It says no material interaction can ever convert possibility into actuality. I could show you some slides. Maybe it will help. Sorry, it's a bit disorganized. I never know what I'm going to talk about. So, okay, this is the scientist, materialist scientist model of things. Things are hierarchical. Things are micro makes up macro. It's sort of bottom-up kind of thing, and cause rises upward from elementary particles. And this model, I already have said, does not work fundamentally. It's not compatible with quantum physics because quantum physics says objects are possibilities. And material interactions can never convert possibility into actuality. So the question is, but when I look, we don't see possibilities, we see actualities, right? But if I am the brain, then my interaction with an object is just brain, matter interacting with matter. That could not possibly convert, because brain itself is a possibility. It cannot possibly convert other possibilities into actuality. This is the paradox called quantum measurement paradox. Okay? So what's the solution? Solution is that there is downward causation, not quite in this way that spiritual traditions propose, something coming from the heaven upwards affecting you. But it's not very far from the truth either, because this is what is the truth. When we look, we must be collapsing electrons' wave of possibility into actuality. We must be doing it because who else? So we could not just be brain. We must be something else. What is changing in quantum physics? Before actuality, we knew from quantum physics that things were possibility. Our knowledge, that is what changes. Possibility shrinks into one facet. Possibility allows many facets. Possibility shrinks to one facet when we look. So it's a change in the knowledge about the object. Here it could be different positions all over the room, an electron, before I looked at it. But after I look, the electron is right here. I have chosen the position. I know now where the electron is. It's a change in my knowledge. And what is the facility that I know with? It is, of course, called consciousness. So we use the word consciousness as the perpetrator of this choice. Okay? Consciousness is not brain phenomenon. Instead, the brain and all objects are possibilities of consciousness. When consciousness looks, these possibilities become actualities. This is the theory that we are forced to acknowledge. This is the resolution of quantum measurement paradox. Why no dualism? Because material objects are possibilities of consciousness itself. Consciousness does not need an interaction, a signal, for choosing from itself. So signal-less communication is possible. And this is also wonderful because if we can find experimental verification of signal-less communication, declares the quantum physicist triumphantly, then we have really, for the first time in human history, experimental metaphysics. We have a metaphysical idea that consciousness is the ground of all being, as mystical, as spiritual it may sound. But if we can show experimentally that really signal-less communication exists, then we have sailed home. We know that this philosophy is true. Experimental metaphysics, experimentally verifiable metaphysics. No longer do we have to depend on the Advaita philosopher or some Indian guru or Tibet. Madame Blavatsky would be delighted. We can just go to the physics lab and find out if non-locality exists. Well, physics labs did discover non-locality in 1982. It did not quite do it. The entrenchment of the belief system of the materialist is so thorough, and maybe it threatens, as Upton Sinclair said, that if you make a living doing something, having a belief, you would be very reluctant to give up the belief because your job would be threatened. Or maybe something like that. But the scientific materialists say that, well, it's quantum physics is weird, there is such a thing as quantum magic, quantum weirdness, but it only affects the elementary particles, subatomic objects. We don't need to worry about it because in the macro, all that non-locality does not show up. We are safe. Are we safe? So in the neurophysiological laboratory, they did experiment with human beings, and these experiments are totally objective. Two people meditate together with the intention that they will have signal-less communication. So let's see what happens. Then they were separated, put in Faraday cages. Now these are cages that are built of electromagnetically impervious walls. In other words, these two subjects are now completely isolated as far as signals are concerned. Their brains now are connected to individual electroencephalogram machines, EEG. And one subject is shown a series of light flashes, producing brain activity, which is measured by the EEG machine connected to that brain. And you have what is called an evoke potential. You can extract a signal. Oops. We can extract a signal from it, and this is the signal. The other subject is not seeing any light flashes, but his or her brain waves are collected anyway. A signal is extracted, and one finds a transfer potential, and look at the overlap. This is the overlap of the evoke potential evoked by the light flashes, and transfer potential transferred because there is no light flashes for the second brain. So it got to be a transfer potential. But how can electrical activity transferred without any electrical wiring, without any electrical connection, not even electromagnetic waves? How can that be? How can that be? This time quantum weirdness doesn't quite work. If it is weirdness, it affects also human beings. That means human beings themselves are a little weird. How? Because they're conscious, because they're connected to this field, non-local field of knowing. There are two kinds of knowing, like spiritual traditions have told us for millennia, two kinds of knowing. One kind of knowing is through local signals, and then there is this non-local knowing, intuition, creativity, mystical knowledge, all this stuff. How could Madame Blavatsky know about things way before? Clairvoyance. Well, she was privy to using quantum non-locality through consciousness. She had a more developed access to this quantum consciousness. Wonderful for theosophy, not so good for the materialist scientist. So the materialist scientist suppresses this knowledge from the press, and the press buys it somehow. So quantum activism. If you have access to the press, convince the press that, look, there are phenomena that you are not emphasizing. They are wonderful phenomena. This experiment has now been replicated in 24 independent experiments in 24 laboratories. From 1993-94 to 2012, there has been fully a couple of dozen individual experiments to prove it. Additionally, there are huge data in other fields. Quantum healing takes place non-locally. A person prays in Denver, Colorado, and a person in San Francisco is healed at a faster rate that could not be explained away. Mental telepathy, of course, we have known for millennia. And many other phenomena. Many books out, I don't need to belabor that. Only very prejudiced people like the skeptical inquirers can deny the validity of the paranormal today. So quantum non-locality is here to stay. Quantum discontinuity, that quantum leap, that concept is here to stay. Quantum activism is required so that this thing, these concepts gain traction. And the concepts gain traction only if it is done properly. How? There are three aspects of science. One aspect is, of course, theory. Science needs theory. Second aspect is experimental data. Theory has to be verified. But these two are not enough. These two are not enough. Why? Because Einstein and Heisenberg were having a debate once. Heisenberg was supporting the idea, well, surely experimental data is all we need. But Einstein told him something that is very poignant. We all have to understand. Einstein said that, look, how you look at data depends on the theory that you are using. It's very easy to understand. Look at how ancient people analyzed that the sun rises in the east and then sets in the west, and that must indicate that the sun goes around the earth, because that's the theory that they had. Same data later on came to be understood. Every child today knows that no, that's not quite true. The earth spins. Additional data was discovered, and the putting together of them demanded that we look at the old data in a new way. It happens all the time in science. So experimental data are not enough. And theory, of course, also evolves. So this theory plus experiment works only so far. What else is important? The third thing that is very important is application. We must apply. We must apply the theory. We must apply the knowledge base that we are gaining through verification of the theory in terms of data. If you can apply and it is useful to us, why did we give up the old theory of sun going around the earth? Because it no longer was useful. It gave us a worldview that was just too narrow, did not allow, did not permit development of the society. Society became moribund under the old religious tradition of Christianity. Vitality was regained by giving science free rein. The philosophy of modernism, allowing both mind and matter to be important, has produced all these wonderful ideas that today we enjoy. It has given us democracy, it has given us capitalism, it has given us liberal education. Very important to recognize. Application of the scientific principles to actually produce things that are useful to us. Electricity has changed us and how we live. Why doesn't the spiritual ideas that Theosophy proposes, that ancient people propose, that is so well developed in countries and cultures like India and Tibet, why don't they gain traction today? Ask yourself that question. Why is it? Because nobody uses this idea to do anything that is tangible, that is concrete. Yesterday was good because, for a change, I heard people how to live spiritual principles. That is rare in discussions of spirituality. If you go listen to spiritual people in India, you'll be absolutely dismayed if you are practice-oriented, because all you will hear is what's the meaning of non-dualism. People will give hour-long, 7 days long, month-long discourses on ideas, but it will be clear to you that nobody is practicing anything. That's the failure of old-fashioned religion. That's the failure of old-fashioned spirituality. So how should we frame things? Quantum activism. Okay, we have this idea of quantum non-locality. We have this idea of quantum discontinuity. Can we live them? How do we live them? This is the question. Can we form technology on the basis of quantum non-locality and quantum discontinuity? Can we apply these principles to our lives, even to our economy, even to the political scene, if you will. Can we change education on the basis of that? Healthcare cost is going up today by leaps and bounds. Can we bring these new ideas into the arena of healthcare and reduce healthcare costs once and for all and rescue our civilization? Civilization itself is endangered because we have given up this emphasis on values. Values such as love, beauty, justice, truth, goodness. In the olden days, those things made sense. Nowadays, it doesn't. Why? Because implicitly we have started believing in scientific materialism enough to give us a lot of leeway. So when it is convenient, when it is opportunistic, we don't hesitate to violate a principle, a value. It serves the numero uno. So a little selfishness doesn't hurt, we say to ourselves. We rationalize. We become cynical. Quantum activism is needed because we need to change from that behavior. We need to realize that this is one area of change in which end does not justify the means. End and means must be congruent. If we use the wrong means, we'll never arrive at the right end in terms of transforming ourselves. We have to get the idea. And in order to change, what do we need? This you have to get. We have been hearing about the right way of thinking ever since the Buddha, some 2,600 years ago, introduced the concept of right thinking. We know what right thinking is. Madame Blavatsky restated it in the Secret Doctrine. Consciousness is the ground of all being. Quantum physics is just rediscovering it. So knowledge is there. What is lacking? What is lacking is how to put that knowledge into practice. What does it involve? This is the application side is where quantum physics is very, very powerful. Quantum physics says a very, very simple thing. That look, if you want to make real change, then you really need to be convinced about something called truth. Quantum physics says truth is archetypal. It's an archetype. It's not just thinking. It's archetypal in nature. We can intuit it, and then we can make thinking models of it. But it's archetypal. It's beyond thinking. It's supramental. This word by Aurobindo is very poignant. Archetypes like truth, love, beauty, justice, goodness, they're supramental. I'm moving a little bit ahead of myself. Let me introduce one more concept here that will help you to talk about archetypes, mind, matter, and vital energy, all in the same emphasis. This is called the philosophy of psychophysical parallelism. It's an old idea. The idea also is found in the Upanishads. Madame Blavatsky just accepted it as given because she was influenced by the olden day thinking, as you know. So we have in Madame Blavatsky's thinking as well that there are 4 kinds of experience, so therefore 4 kinds of worlds. In quantum physics, that's allowed without dualism. Why? Because, again, the same idea of quantum non-locality. The 4 different worlds that give us the 4 different experiences, as in Carl Jung's thinking, sensing physical, feeling the vital world, thinking the mental world, and intuiting the supramental world. That's the crucial word, intuition. So we come to this idea that all these worlds exist as possibilities in the ground of being that consciousness is. And then when consciousness chooses out of the possibility, the actuality, then we get an experience. So if I choose from the vital world, I get a vital energy experience, which is what we call a feeling. So when you feel, you're not feeling material sensory objects. You are feeling a vital energy object. When the speaker yesterday was talking about energy, she was not talking about physical energy. It's interesting because nobody even bothered to distinguish, because in this circle everybody knows that energy means vital energy. Physicists would be shocked, of course. But really, energy was co-opted by physics in the year 1837. And long before that, the word energy was used by energy traditions. Like if you read William Blake, you find a beautiful line, energy is eternal delight. But Blake, as you know, lived in the 18th century. How did Blake know about energy, which was introduced in physics in 1837, 19th century? Interesting, isn't it? So we have known about energies. Of course, Hindus called it prana, and Chinese called it chi, for millennia. Concept of energy in physics came to be discovered only recently. So what is energy? Energy is movement, a kind of a naming of a kind of a movement that is convenient to introduce. And that's what we call energy. It's a capacity of moving. Capacity of moving, vital energy likewise. What moves? Rupert Sheldrake gave us the idea. What moves are morphogenetic fields. That's what moves. What moves are blueprints of biological form. Biological form organs, they are built from blueprints called morphogenetic field. Like an architect builds a house on the basis of a mental blueprint. Similarly, consciousness builds the biological body from blueprints called morphogenetic field. Morpho means form. Genetic, of course, is creation. For the creation of biological form, these are the blueprints. So every organ that we have has corresponding morphogenetic field. So whenever we are experiencing physically an organ, associated with it is a morphogenetic field that is also changing in movement, and that's the movement that we experience as feeling. Okay, very good idea. So how does that manifest? A little bit going into it would be good. If I can find that slide. Oops, not that way. All these things, do they have meaning? Yes, they do. Ah, there we go. Oops, there it is. Okay, so this is the mystery of chakras explained. Every chakra point is a place where we have a physical organ or more, one or two or more, and correspondingly there are morphogenetic fields, which then moves. Moves meaning what? Goes in and out of actuality. And that's the movement that we feel. So why do we feel when we are feeling romance? Why do we feel in the heart chakra? We feel it because that's the organ of the immune system, thymus gland. Me and not me distinction. So I look at you, and if I have a feeling that you are mine, then my immune system is in agreement with yours, permit each other, and therefore an urge grows about uniting the two bodies, and that's what we call romantic love. As simple as that. So in this way, if we understand chakras, then a great amount of understanding of our own feelings has been achieved. How does that help? That helps because much of our health issues are related to these chakras. For example, if you block heart energy, then your immune system is no longer functioning properly. Thymus gland function, that me and not me distinction, is not working, and it's dangerous. it may give you cancer. Why? Because potentially cancerous cells are being produced by the body all the time, but they are killed off by the immune system. If the immune system is not functioning, these cancerous cells can become malignant, and that's well-developed cancer. So why am I sharing this? Why is this important? This is important because recognize that this is solid application. If we can now change our medicine system, recognize that by investigating the chakras and keeping them in good flow of vital energy, I can prevent disease like cancer. Yesterday's speaker wonderfully talked about how grieving is detrimental to us because it blocks communication with a deceased person's soul. Very interesting concept, right? I'll tell you something more. Grieving blocks vital energy at the heart chakra and is responsible for a very large number of women suffering from breast cancer. There is a physician named Ramesh Chauhan in India who had this wonderful, brilliant idea of using vital energy measurement technology to see if there is blockage at the heart chakra. So he takes women and takes a Carlian photograph. I won't explain what that is in any detail, but you can find books that will explain it to you. It just takes a photograph, so to speak, of whether the energy, vital energy in the heart chakra is blocked. And he can detect very early signs of breast cancer. If a grieving woman is having problems with the immune system or not, can now be checked. This is wonderful news. This is what I'm talking about. Applications. Vital energy is no longer a concept. It's no longer an esoteric concept. It is a living concept in terms of a technology whose time has come. Short of biopsy, such early cancer could not be detected. Imagine the number of lives we can save when this kind of technology comes in full force, and we somehow can convince our society to look at this kind of data seriously. Applications produces change that's fundamental. Okay, so I deviated a lot from what I was talking about, and I want to go back to the idea of how we can know values and live them. Okay. What we need to do is talk about creativity. Why? Because why can't we live a value? Ask yourself, why can't we live a value? Well, it has to do with our biology. We can live those things most easily for which we have a brain circuit. For the convenience of human beings, in fact, much earlier, even in the animal kingdom, what happened was that the chakras requires attention. If you are guided in terms of feelings with the help of chakras, it requires a lot of attention. So early on, in the development of the animal kingdom, in the evolution of the animals, it was found convenient. Consciousness made these brain circuits. Brain took over the function of feeling. The feeling center shifted from the chakras through the amygdala to the limbic brain circuits. These are called instincts. Action is almost instantaneous because the amygdala comes into the picture. These are all experimentally verified data now. The amygdala comes into the picture very quickly. Of course, the chakras are first. That's non-local, instantaneous. But the amygdala comes into the picture so quickly that most people are really aware of feelings only as brain phenomena. But which feelings? For which we have brain circuits. What do we have brain circuits for? Those are the instincts. And if you count them out, you find one very interesting thing. The brain circuits exist, the instincts exist only for those feelings which usually we experience with a negative connotation. They lead to suffering. Not necessarily immediately, but eventually at least. They're connected with the three low chakras. They're connected with the reproductive system and connected with the metabolic, anabolic, catabolic system. Fear, anger, lust, competitiveness, jealousy. These are the kind of emotions. Emotions are effect of these feelings on our thinking. Emotional brain circuits develop a little bit later in the evolutionary history of human beings, basically. Animals don't have this particular corruption of their feelings, if you call it a corruption, but human beings do. So we call them negative emotional brain circuits. You don't need creativity to act negatively. It comes naturally. This is why the sociobiological picture of us is so convincing. We behave naturally as competitive. No creativity needed. But try to love. The higher chakras were not similarly represented in our evolutionary history, not yet. Higher chakras are not represented in the brain as brain circuits. There is no love circuit that we can count on. When we need to love the most, our intimate person has become an intimate enemy. I'm fighting, and there is nothing to help me, no brain circuit. How observant do I have to be to bring the energy to the heart chakra, like the spiritual traditions say? Love your enemy. It's easy for Jesus to say. For ordinary mortal, loving the enemy is well nigh impossible. How can I love when my brain circuit of anger is so active? It feels good to be angry too. So creativity is needed. Why? Because with creativity, we can start the journey of making a positive emotional brain circuit. What is it that in creativity, that exists in creativity, that gives us that? This insight, sudden insight, creativity researchers have discovered that creativity consists of 4 stages. I'll come to the first 2 a little later. Let's concentrate the sudden insight. Why sudden? Because it's a quantum leap. It's a jump from the mind into the supramental, the abode of the archetypes. Now, here is the crucial thing for us to rediscover. Spiritual traditions have told us this from the beginning. Pure Land is the land of truth. The land of the archetypes is the land of truth. Archetypes have truth value. So if we jump to the archetypal land, what happens? I glimpse at truth. This is why not only the creative experience comes with an aha, surprise, which signifies discontinuity, but the creative experience also comes with a certainty. I know this is true. I really can love this person. If I know that I really can love this person, you will notice that loving becomes very easy. Not relatively. I mean, we still have to work on it. You still have to remember to bring flowers to your loved person when suitable occasion comes. But the point is that you do those things now. You don't have any problem with those things because you know that anytime I act on my feeling, I'll build a brain circuit. And gradually your brain circuit of love becomes so powerful in you that in the moment when loving your enemy becomes important, guess what? This is what modern physics has taught us. These brain circuits act like attractors using a language of chaos theory. You sort of fall into it, then you cannot come out of it very easily. But if you have another brain circuit, then even a little change for a chaotic system, this is called butterfly effect. Even the fluttering of a butterfly wing can affect something as big as the weather system. So something as insignificant ordinarily as Jesus is teaching, like you remember just at the right time, oh, Jesus did say, love thy enemy. Let me try it. Even that little thought will allow you to come out of the competitive, angry brain circuit to your loving circuit that you already have. But you have to have the loving circuit before that can happen. The brain has to go into the circuit. The circuit has to be there. The greatest discovery of neuroscience in recent time is that brain is so plastic. Neurons are so plastic. Neuroplasticity is so ubiquitous that we can continue building these brain circuits whatever age we are. Age doesn't matter anymore. It used to be very disheartening. Oh, Theosophists are so old. It's no longer a bugaboo. Old person can be as creative as young people. This is the new attitude. Why? Because of neuroplasticity, this new discovery. We can make brain circuit at any age. Okay? We can change. If we remember creativity, if we remember neuroplasticity, and if we remember the process. Look at the process. Preparation, this one everybody knows. And then incubation. The biggest secret of quantum physics is this. We human beings are not machines. We don't process in one level, just the manifest level. We also process in the realm of possibility, the realm that is called unconscious or unmanifest, or in the spiritual tradition, transcendent, that non-local reality when objects exist as potential, objects including thoughts and feelings. They exist as possibilities. I can process in the domain of possibilities, not with conscious awareness, but with what is called unconscious in Freudian terminology, which means unawareness. I'm not aware that I'm processing, but I am processing. This is the whole idea of unconscious. There is unconscious processing that goes on. So this incubation, you're not doing anything. You're just being. You're just sitting on an egg, so to speak. Quantum possibilities proliferate if you are not doing anything, if you are not collapsing them into actuality. What a beautiful idea. Do and be. I call it the do-be-do-be-do process. very beautiful synthesis is taking place. The do is what machines can. Machines don't have any power to go into the two realms. Only human beings can. Do and be. Unconscious processing as well as conscious processing. Both are needed for creativity. Do, be, do, be, do. If we allow that process, then possibilities will proliferate to such an extent that the new combination will be available much, much faster than a machine could, because machine has to process in the one domain only. Try it out, try it out, try it out, how long it takes. But in the unconscious, conflicting possibilities can exist together. Thesis and antithesis can exist together. And therefore, the answers, which are often transcend both the thesis and the antithesis, that gestalt of various pieces, that all of a sudden appears to be the whole thing, the answer to the problem that I'm trying to solve. And Newton discovers the theory of gravity. A Picasso gets the inspiration of painting human beings as peculiar-looking cubic drawings, but describing multidimensionality of the human being like never before. Deepak Chopra discovers quantum healing, the concept of bringing quantum physics into medicine. A mystic discovers love. All these discoveries become possible because this unconscious processing allows opposites to exist simultaneously and allows us to process opposites simultaneously. So fighting between intimate people that seem to be detrimental to relationship now becomes help to relationship. Quantum processing, unconscious processing, do and be both. This is the mystery of getting into the sudden insight. So we have sudden insight and then manifestation. As I said, sudden insight gives us that truth, that certainty, and this certainty, once that comes to me, that yes, it's possible, yes, I do love, then to make a brain circuit is easy. Because those things, those little things that require much remembering, is now practically automatic. They flow from us. And because they flow from us, brain circuits are built. We act whenever we get a feeling, we act. That action brings in manifestation in terms of neuroplastic change in the brain, producing a brain circuit. Now we have a circuit of love. Now there are some guidelines. Time is already up. Should I go a little more, or? You go. I go? Good, thank you, Tim. So I go a little more. So what I need to do now is to tell you some guidelines of the new physics to theosophists. Let me just say that theosophists basically are already quantum activists because they live. I mean, the idea of being a theosophist, as the speakers yesterday emphasized, the idea of theosophy indeed is to live the doctrines. We're not satisfied with having the doctrines, but we want to live them. So what are the new guidelines that quantum physics is giving us? The most important guideline a theosophist already knows, but let me reiterate, because it is really the most important one. Remember, the spiritual traditions of the old became dogmatic in terms of world negation. This is very common thinking in Indian or Buddhist or Tibetan or Eastern thinking in general, that the world means nothing. In Christianity, that too exists in a slightly different form, because it's not easy to change. So how do you get people to your fold? You say, well, don't bother about changing, because you can't. So, but good news is that you can die. You're going to die anyway. And when you die, guess what? You will go to heaven if you just surrender to Jesus. Basically, if you come to church regularly and pay money. So in both traditions, world is to be negated, because world gives only suffering to us. This way, suffering is institutionalized. So ordinary people are those people who suffer. The extraordinary people, the elite, they of course can always find pleasurable activities. And that is the kind of society that will live for a very long time. That's the Middle Age society, Dark Ages. Huge hierarchies. So how we changed? We changed when we started developing the idea that no, meaning processing, value processing, even ordinary people are capable of doing it. We don't really need all these churches and gurus. Theosophy is a very democratic organization, but Theosophy is not the only organization that has promoted these ideas, that anybody can have access. But we have to be a little bit careful. First of all, we posit the world to be good. World evolves. You have to recognize that it is because we recognize evolution that the world is good. The idea that some spiritual traditions like Hindus and Buddhists favor is that, well, world was paradise in the beginning and it goes downhill after that. Hindus say it's Kali Yuga. It is to be expected that values are denigrated today. So why can't I live values? Because I can't. It's Kali Yuga. See, I can't change because it's Kali Yuga. If you can find a reason for not changing. So scientific materialist says, I don't need to change because, look, it's all matter. Values are not important. Spiritual traditions say, well, look, we can't change because this. We go to heaven anyway after death. We don't need to change. Or we cannot change because it's Kali Yuga. One way or the other, we don't need to change. So that changes in Theosophy. We work out why? Because we can't change. And then let's leave heaven on earth. Why wait for death? And look, Theosophy also has, as Madame Blavatsky recognized a long time ago, the concept of reincarnation. We don't really go to heaven. We reincarnate back to the hell again. Hell that is called earth. Living with these anger, jealousy, negative emotions galore. That's hell. How to get out of it? Creativity. Evolve in the world. Not only you evolve, but change others. Activism. Change others as we evolve. The world evolves. Values become better and better. Civilization gets better and better. There is evidence for it. That's the way to think. Evolution is not Darwinism. Evolution is purposive. Evolution is evolution of consciousness. Couple more concepts and I'll be done. One very important concept for Theosophists and all persons who are interested in spirituality is the idea that give up ancient notions such as money cannot buy happiness or money cannot buy love How many of you believe such a thing? If you are honest, you will probably all raise your hands. I won't even ask it. Wrong. It's not necessary to think that way. You see, what has happened because of dogmas, such as the world is not important, because of dogmas, such as money cannot buy happiness, we have separated the idea of sacred from what we call mundane. We have developed a dualism which we try to live. So we try to live in the sacred. And what do? We ignore the mundane. We allow the mundane to be handled, to be controlled by people who don't even care. We allow the world to go down the docks. This cannot pass. How do we do otherwise? There is a saying in Islam, very interesting. You know, Islam is one of the religions that is very, 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 very fundamentalist. But in the book called Quran, there is a beautiful saying, which is that if Muhammad cannot go to the mountains, mountains will come to Muhammad. What does that mean? That means if mundane people, ordinary people, cannot go to the sacred, because sacred is so difficult, creativity is difficult, then let the sacred come to ordinary people. What's keeping it? Ideas like money cannot buy happiness. I'll tell you a story, and I'll end here. My wife and I, Uma, some of you know her, we were working at the bank of Ganges one day, and a door opens, and somebody comes out and says, hey, you guys want to hear a laughing Baba? He has come down from the Himalayas. So we are curious, so we went. So I sit down, and Baba is talking on the platform. Baba means father, and, you know, he's a religious figure, father figure, so he's talking like a father figure. And as all father figures are, pretty dull talk, could not hold my interest. So I'm looking around for amusement. And I find a very strange thing. Everybody has a smile on their face. And I look at myself, I too have a smile on my face, and it's pretty deep. Even my eyes are smiling. And then it dawns on me. Oh, this is why this fellow is called Laughing Baba. It doesn't matter what he's talking about. His being is producing the spontaneity of happiness in the listeners. So suppose an entrepreneur, a theosophist who is also an entrepreneur, finds such a person, or even better, finds a way of manufacturing such people in a sort of guru factory, and then puts such a person in the middle of Wheaton, Illinois, and this Baba is sitting in this room. On the door, there is a sign. Happiness for sale costs $100 an hour. Wouldn't you like to pay $100 and sit with this Baba? I would. If people refuse to go to spirituality, spirituality will have to be brought to people through one language that everybody understands, through the language of money. This is very important. I call it spiritual economics. If the economy is made spiritual, there is no resisting spirituality. There is no resisting the idea of transcendence. There is no resisting downward causation. There is no resisting creativity. All those materialist resistance will give away. That is quantum activism. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question about application. I'm a quantum activist neuroscientist, and I've been using foot reflexology for 25 years in practice, and I'm interested in the theoretical and scientific development of holographic theory in terms of nursing science. And you haven't really specifically spoken to that, although you mentioned Rupert Sheldrake's work and morphic resonance. But could you please talk about the state of the science in terms of the hologram and how we might understand that in terms of healing?
Yeah, this is a fair question. Hologram is a model because model of consciousness. It was quite popular for a while because of some data that existed that showed that the brain does not have localized memory. Memory exists, seem to exist everywhere in the brain, or maybe nowhere in the brain. So one explanation went into the hologram description, because the hologram has the characteristic of even a little piece have the entire information that was coded in the hologram. So the holographic theory became popular for a while, but its scope was limited from the beginning, because consciousness, as we know, has two aspects. Consciousness, of course, is a reservoir of objects, possibilities, but when the possibilities actualize, something very interesting takes place, which is that we no longer have just an object. We also have a subject. So consciousness is potentially also a subject. That aspect will miss if we describe consciousness as an object, like even a hologram, which is a very interesting object, no doubt. It captures that quality of non-locality without positing quantum non-locality. So that's a great power of the holographic thinking. But it's limited because it does not give us the subject aspect, the knower aspect. Consciousness consists of the knower and the known, not just the known, not just the objects. Okay? Good.
Thank you. Betty, did you have a question? I think your hand was up last time. I'm sorry.
I had actually a very mundane, specific question, but I think it is applicable in the experiment that you mentioned, in which the consciousness was transferred between the two subjects. Was the subject who was the receiver focusing on the consciousness, or did it just transfer without any focus, any intention?
No, actually, I did mention intention very lightly, probably you missed it. Yes, intention was very important.
Okay, that's what I
Intention, the two people meditated with the intention that they communicate non-locally. Without that intention, in fact, people who could not hold the intention for the duration of the experiment, I didn't even emphasize the other picture on the right, which showed the control subjects. And control subjects who could not hold that meditative intention did never got transfer potential. So intention is crucial. Please, ladies and gentlemen, everybody hear this. Intentions are crucial. And again, to my tremendous pleasure, both of yesterday's speakers that I heard emphasized conscious intention. It is the beginning point of every creative activity. I must intend, not black holes, but I must intend to love. If I intend to go into black holes, maybe I would. I don't know. But intention of love produces a loving circuit in the brain eventually. If I don't start with the intention, it never will happen. Okay?